Welcome to the next episode of Building the Open Web. Before we start episode today, I have something special to tell you. If you're a Web3 founder, we're actually opening up the second batch of our accelerator, where we can help you with developer incentives, funding, business models, finding adoption. We would love to work with you starting January 2021, and we're still considering some applications until then. Please apply. It's openwebcollective.com. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome to Building the Open Web podcast. It's a new episode. Today we have Carolyn. Thank you for joining us. Maybe we can start with a brief background.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bit of background. I started in this space in 2015 and was one of the first employees at Consensus. So was deeply involved in the Ethereum ecosystem even before Ethereum had launched on mainnet. I think maybe I joined 3 or 4 months before mainnet. But interestingly enough, in 2015, when I joined Consensus, I did not have a tech background or even very much of a startup or an entrepreneurship background. I actually have a background in the social sciences. So I studied psychology, sociology, and I worked for a while as a social worker, as a therapist. And then I went to graduate school in Boston to study macro social systems. And it was while I was in grad school in Boston doing a couple of different master's degrees when I ran into blockchain. I discovered cryptocurrency and the idea of, it was really smart contracts and the larger blockchain vision that spoke to me as a social scientist. I met some folks at Harvard Law who were thinking about the legal aspect of smart contracts. I met some folks at MIT Media Lab who were thinking about identity in smart contracts. And it just clicked for me what blockchain and what this new thing called Ethereum that wasn't live yet. This was like back in 2014. What that meant. I'd heard about Bitcoin before and I read about it on Reddit maybe in like 2011. And it felt immediately like, oh, this isn't for me. This is too technical. This is too like finance focused. So it really took the vision of Ethereum and smart contracts, I think, to bring me into the space. But once I got it, I just was obsessed. I knew that this is what I wanted to work on and spent some time in late 2014, early 2015, kind of doing some informal work, maybe more academic, I guess I would say. I joined like a working group with some friends loosely and ended up going to a hackathon put on by some of my friends at Harvard Law. They do Koala is what it's called, the coalition, something about legal blockchain work. They were doing a hackathon at Stanford in early 2015. And that's how I got connected with some of the first employees at Consensus and eventually down the line joined them. That's the deep backstory. But since then, I've been doing various things in the blockchain space, was at Consensus for 3 years, and then moved on to work with Casa, the Bitcoin security startup. And then for the past year, I've been with Thesis, working primarily on tBTC and the Keep network.
Interesting. And for a Consensus, quick question, like what was the role early on when you joined and how did it evolve over time?
Great question. So early on, I think I was like 10 of us, 15 of us when I joined. So at that early stage, it's really jack of all trades. And that's what's so exciting about startups for me. I love the early stage when you get to, have a hand in so many different parts of the product and the company. But I actually started primarily doing communications marketing work. I was like writing blog and newsletters and social media and things like that. And I think there were only a couple of us at the time doing non-technical work. So that's what needed to go out first. But I think fairly quickly, as we scaled, they hired some real marketers and content people. And I started to work more on operations and business development, community. Like really, I grew up with Consensus in terms of my own I think, progression as like working on early stage startups as an entrepreneur. So I got a chance to do a lot of things. And as time progressed, I focused more on operations, internal operations. And because Consensus was and still is a very unique company in terms of the way that this venture studio and all of the different entities inside of it and teams are like loosely coupled and structured, that work looked less like operations in terms of legal and finance, kind of just operating a business, and it was more like maybe working on a platform, or when you think about like a venture studio, or doing a lot of work in between teams and on like organizational development and growth.
And do you think that at the time there was kind of like emergent model for like how to kind of organize in a more like decentralized way, or like a bunch of hub and spokes that Consensus had? Like, do you think like we do have now a good answer for like how to build organizations for like crypto like natively? Because that's on my mind, because we're also like figuring out organizational design at near.
Yeah, no, that definitely was a big thing that we thought about and worked on at Consensus. And the vision for that really came from Joe Lubin. From day one, he would always say that, the Consensus, this is a flat organization. This is a mesh of people all working towards the same goal. Much like a blockchain, right? We need to have broad consensus, and the way that the company is structured is never going to be hierarchical, top-down, legacy world, so to speak, in terms of systems building, which makes a lot of sense, right? If you have a big future for building the decentralized web, the decentralized future, you have to dog food that. You have to design your own systems accordingly. And definitely there was a lot of learnings from that. It's, I think one of the biggest ones is that it's very hard to design a decentralized organization. And it's even harder when you're scaling super quickly, which did happen at Consensus. We had, I think, 1 year when we really leaped up from a couple hundred to over 1,000. I bet you can imagine what year that was, 2017 to 2018. But with that, we definitely found that it's easier and simpler in some areas to have some hierarchy, because hierarchy scales, right? Very quickly. But there were still a lot of areas of the company, even when I left in 2018, that we're still utilizing a decentralized model. I think the studio model and is a great example of this, because the startups that are spinning out of a studio are, by design, they're supposed to be independent and autonomous. So designing services for them in a studio sense, it definitely lends itself more to the decentralized model.
Mm-hmm. And how did you decide to join Thesis? What was the kind of after Casa? What was the kind of main reasons?
Yeah, so I loved working on the Casa team. It was fantastic to get some experience with the Bitcoin ecosystem. Jeremy Welch brought me on, and it was fantastic to get to work with Jameson Lopp, who is, I think most people who are in crypto have heard of him. He's sort of a Bitcoin OG, and to really understand some of the core Bitcoin principles around like security and resiliency, and some of the maybe go slower rather than move fast and break things. some of the stuff that you don't see as much in the Ethereum ecosystem. So I definitely enjoyed that, but at the end of the day, I decided that I'm much more interested in working on just the bleeding edge tech, and getting a bit more in depth with software, and Web3, right? That's initially why I got into blockchain tech, into crypto, and the fact that Casa was pretty staunchly a Bitcoin first, Bitcoin only company. That for me, I didn't see myself with them long term. So I took a bit of time off. Actually, I took a couple of months just because crypto moves so fast. All of a sudden, I had been working for 4 years in crypto and had never taken a real vacation. So I took a couple months. And then when I started to dip my toes back in and look for a next project. I was introduced to the Thesis team via Linda Z. Actually, she is excellent. Definitely one of the favorite investors to work with. She made the intro, and I was surprised. I'd never met the Thesis team before the Keep team, and they had been, pretty heads down working on. It had been largely the Keep network, this big privacy layer on top of Ethereum using multi-party computation tech, so some pretty deep tech stuff. But I looked at it, I'm like, this is awesome. And then I spoke with them for a second time, and this is when I met Matt, and they're like, we have something to tell you about. And this is when they pulled out tBTC. I think it was not yet announced. And I immediately was like, yes, this is amazing. It combines, my expertise like in the Ethereum community and then Bitcoin on top of it. So tBTC is a Bitcoin bridge to Ethereum that allows for people who have Bitcoin to do all of the cool things you can do on Ethereum in DeFi, decentralized finance space. So things like earning interest, taking out loans, like getting leverage, all these decentralized finance, like financial infrastructure pieces that if you're really building the centralized web, a decentralized finance system, you need these things natively on the blockchain. But in the Bitcoin space, because Bitcoin is so it is just such a single purpose tech. It's the best one out there. I'm so glad we have it. I love Bitcoin, but like, admittedly, Bitcoin is just Bitcoin. And there's just such an obvious need in my mind to bridge those two so that Bitcoin can be Bitcoin on its chain, but also you can use Bitcoin on other blockchains like Ethereum using a decentralized model where you're not trusting a third party, or you're not trusting an institution. It's still sort of a not your keys, not your coin kind of mentality. So tBTC was that. I'm like, I'm on board.
Damn. And so I assume you then immediately kind of saw the value when you were introduced to it?
Yes, definitely. I think, it took me a little bit to catch up and learn about the other models that were out there and why this one specifically worked. But like the immediate value proposition, made a lot of sense.
And was Thesis or is Thesis structured as a venture studio? So like this is one of the projects, or this one took kind of biggest focus right now?
So I can explain the story of Thesis. So Thesis it's the umbrella company, or you could say a small venture studio, umbrella company over the Keep network, and also the company Fold, which used to be called Card for Coin, is a part of the Thesis umbrella. Fold it's a Bitcoin a payments, really a Bitcoin rewards company. So you can use gift cards and earn rewards in sats, Satoshis. They're coming out with a credit card soon, so you can earn your those cashback deals that nobody ever uses or wants. Like you can get Satoshis, get sats back basically instead of points. So, but that's Fold, and that's a company that Matt Luongo and Corbin Pond, the founders of Keep, they founded this company back in 2013 maybe, and since then it's partially spun out of Thesis, and Will Reeves came on a few years ago and is the CEO and is doing an amazing job driving. But like you mentioned, the main project under Thesis is Keep and tBTC, being closely related. We do have a couple of very early stage stealth things. One's related to DeFi that we're working on, but the main priority is Keep right now.
Mm-hmm. And what is your day-to-day like today?
Yeah, so my role is what's my role? Oh yes, head of business strategy is the title. Like I said, with early stage stuff, I got this from Consensus, but we always had tongue-in-cheek roles or thought that like titles weren't as necessary or rigid as they are in the default world, quote unquote. But yeah, my day-to-day, so I'm working at the Thesis level, but because Thesis is focusing so much on tBTC, it's primarily that. So I do a lot of work on partnerships, Also, just largely like overarching product and growth strategy, kind of everything that touches the business side. I work closely with the product team, the tech team, and Matt, of course, who's the project lead. Also do touch on a lot of fundraising, right? And like investor relations and future fundraising. And then integrations is a big part. I think that's a part of partnerships, but getting more into the weeds, that's something that I am working on day to day. So with tBTC, that looks like a lot of the DeFi projects out there, like Maker and Compound and Aave, working with them and countless others that are popping up to make sure that they have what they need to integrate and use tBTC now that we're live. And then I think the last thing that I work on day to day is looking forward beyond just tBTC on Ethereum and the success and growth of that over the next several months. But beyond, there are a couple of partnerships that we have brewing to bring Bitcoin, to bring tBTC to other chains besides just Ethereum, essentially. I think Celo is that's the one that just was announced a week or two ago. We're going to be doing that next, but we're also in talks with some other chains to similarly bring Bitcoin there. So that's kind of I guess that doesn't break down the exact day to day, but my day is a mix of any number of those things pushing all that forward.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. It reminds me a bit of my job too. And overall, what are some of the skill sets you think that came either through working at Consensus or Casa, or overall you feel like the most important in your current role?
So, well, I guess I'll even rewind before Consensus. I'll say that my foundation in the social sciences and all of the work that I did when I was much younger, I was actually a family therapist for a period of time. So that sort of interpersonal work, like that base level, like psychology, and working with people, helping people collaborate and communicate effectively, like that was my foundation going into all of this. And I guess, since this podcast is, talking about entrepreneurship more broadly, I'll say that, looking back, I'm sort of surprised that I didn't find that leap more daunting into tech and entrepreneurship. But, having a background in something that you wouldn't normally think of as related to tech, don't let that hold you back. There are always strengths that can help you get off the ground, and especially with the tech space and crypto, my soft skills with communication and management, so to speak, there wasn't a lot of that in the early days because it was all very hard tech. So that was definitely a help. And then some of the other skills I picked up at Consensus and beyond. I mean, at Consensus, it was a lot about project management and product management, specifically related to quick, rapid iteration of crypto products, right? This can look a little bit different in, I think, more mainstream tech. But with crypto, because it's so nascent, there's certain things that you want to be asking, you want to be looking for in terms of potential and product market fit. It definitely leans a little bit more towards those that are technically savvy and can kind of analyze like architecture and sort of the larger systematic element. And so that's something that I definitely sharpened my skills there at Consensus and still use those today. And then also I learned a lot about growth and marketing at Consensus and brand communications. That's something that I'm still using today for sure. And I'll say when I moved from Consensus to Casa, I learned a lot of things, but I think the one that stands out the most that I still use that I didn't get a chance to do at Consensus because of the way it was funded, but was just traditional venture fundraising. And so Casa was no token. It was I worked on seed and Series A prep and stuff like that, and that was very helpful. And I think that may be backwards for some entrepreneurs in crypto. They learn regular fundraising first and then crypto fundraising later. But came about it a different way.
That's pretty cool. And for Thesis, how do you also measure success? Is there a particular North Star you're shooting for?
So at Thesis, we are a venture studio. But for us, it's really all about execution and delivery first. We're a lean team. We only really focus on a couple things at a time, and really in terms of the primary amount of our energy, just one thing. And we focus on our strengths, right, which is tech and tech execution. We did a bunch of this deep secure multi-party computation work. So we really have honed our chops there. And so that's what we're focusing on. And so we're really more about shipping and execution and product market fit, finding users first, and then raising money, right? So that's what we focus on, rather than starting broadly with more money and then kind of seeing what sticks, right? That's the other model. I guess besides execution, the other thing I'd say is there's definitely very strong vision with Thesis. I know we haven't actually shared much of this with the world yet because we've been focusing on keeping tBTC, but I think we're going to start talking a little bit more outwardly about Thesis and what we're all about. But it's this vision of building technology that is ultimately, freedom affirming, that, fights against censorship resistance, that is, inclusive, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And also, how do you overall stay on top of the industry? Do you feel like there are particular periodicals you read or view or listen to, or you pretty much heads down and it's very hard to stay up to speed also with such a fast-paced change in the industry?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's hard to keep up, even if it's your job to just, I don't know, be an investor and keep your eyes on the news. I think that it's even impossible for people who do that full time to have their thumb on the pulse of everything. But let's see. I mean, I think like everyone else in crypto, I am immersed in crypto Twitter because things just move so fast, and I think that's why a lot of us in the industry are on Twitter, because the feed moves as fast as as updates and new tech move. But you can't stay on Twitter all day. So the things that I use to just sort of get some recaps, like if there's a new project that I'm like, oh, I need to do a bit of a deeper dive and understand what's going on with this advancement or that project. On the DeFi side, I really like, so Laurishin has her weekly podcasts. Those are great, just what's going on that week. And the Defiant. So yeah, Camille Rosso does a really good job on the DeFi side, whatever's hot that week or those couple of weeks, she'll do a great job at. And then I really, in terms of newsletters, I like Token Daily. Suna does a great job. And then outside of more just Ethereum, I do like the Zero Knowledge podcast. That's a good one. Anna Rose does that with they get outside of just Ethereum and more broad Web3 stuff. So those are my picks.
Those are good resources. How do you think also overall just space? To talk briefly about outside of Thesis, how did the space change since 2014, 2015 when you joined and now?
Yeah, that's a long answer. So there were definitely a few waves. If I'm going to get historical here, I think the first period was this era up until maybe mid 2017 when the market started to take off. There was this time in 2015, 2016. When Ethereum had just launched, Bitcoin had been around for a while and had its own sort of set of ups and downs. But I think for those first couple of years that I was involved, it was very, very small, very tight knit. People would ask what I did for a living, and then they would look at me like I had 5 heads when I tried to explain what blockchain is. And then all of that changed in 2017, of course. And then people were like, oh yeah, Bitcoin, what coin should I buy next? But those early days, yeah, I mean, I feel like people are nostalgic for them for sure. They did feel special when you could kind of know everybody in the community. And there was a sense of people being there because they were super excited about the technology and there's like nothing else they'd rather be doing. And also outside of kind of just like the tech interest, I think there was a similar, but like a slightly different perspective of people that cared about the values of this technology and really wanted to build Web3, to build a decentralized economy, for those values, to see those put in place and to fix some of the ills that we see now in the financial system and we see now in the sort of the rent-seeking unhealthiness of the way that the modern internet has developed. So that was all in 2015, 2016. Like everybody who came in, like they had those values super strongly. And, I won't say that all of that changed overnight, in 2017, 2018, when the price started to rise and the larger public started to have more of an understanding of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But it certainly attracted a lot more people. Some of those people were fantastic. It's amazing. It was amazing to get in, people like leaving Google and Apple and like really talented folks coming into the space and wanting to be entrepreneurs and work on this tech. But then on the other hand, we also got, when you have a gold rush, you have a certain type of people that rush into the space to make money. So, I don't know, I'm a very idealistic kind of person. So, to me, like, great, like those folks bring their own strengths in some sense, but also that brought with it a lot of scamminess, a lot of, just things that could be dangerous to the ecosystem as well in terms of educating new people, new consumers, retail folks who are coming into the space, and potentially making some bad choices. And since the bull or the bear market, 2018, 2019, it was a nice quiet time, I'd say. Heads down, building, some of the frothiness kind of got drained out. And now, the past 6 months to a year, we've really seen a lot of exciting stuff in two areas. In Ethereum, in the DeFi space, right? Ethereum is no longer just ICO land that it was in 2017, 2018. There's real stuff being built, real applications. And then the second thing that's exciting to me is new layer ones that are coming online, like you guys, and other chains. There's just a lot of scaling tech around that, and that's finally coming to fruition. When back in 2018, or it was still early and still talk. So that's I kind of gave a long answer there, but I'm a history nerd. I like to give history analysis of.
No, that's super helpful, I think, for listeners. I also really like reading your post from, I think it was 2019, where you dissected like regular users versus fanatics who like go deeper versus developers. Do you think this is like roughly the split today? Like they're like almost like three personas. There are like developers building in a space. There are like people who like use DeFi products, for example, and then there are people who like more like on a surface. Or like how would you split the kind of like overall the space?
Yeah, no, I'd say that I still think about it in that way. And it's a really useful model for anybody that's coming in and thinking about product market fit. It's really like, who's your audience? Who are you building this for? And I think breaking it down that way is helpful. I would even add, additional categories across those three, but broadly, it's like, on one end, you have the retail users, people who are just like dabbling in the space. And then in the second level, and on that end, I say retail users, but I do think that you can add an institutional category to that. Like there are larger firms that are just interested in, okay, maybe I should have some Bitcoin, I should have some crypto. But it's very sort of surface level of like, I'm just going to invest and not really get too in depth. And then, level 2, you get a little bit deeper, and, the crypto fanatic here, it can look different depending on what area of crypto you're looking in, right? I think there's different folks who are really excited about like Ethereum and DeFi. And I think that you can even say that Bitcoin has crypto fanatics, but they're enthusiastic about, Lightning and things that are happening on their chain. And like on the other side of the world, you got people who are into, Tron or whatever it is, using those applications. And I think we'll see a lot more, right, as some of these like L1s start to grow a little bit. And then deeper, and this is almost like it's slightly different levels, developers, people who want to build. And I think what they're interested in, they still can be affiliated in some of those camps, like Ethereum, Bitcoin, Tron, whatever. But their needs and, why they are picking up a product, it's going to be different. So you need to analyze that just in its own space.
And do you think that across those people, the level of entry of, like, say, like developers in space or like crypto fanatics is good, sufficient? Do you feel like there is something we can do to increase the amount of people entering the space? Also, like, what are the skill sets that are like missing today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, on the developer side, I'll say that. So the Ethereum community and consensus being a huge part of this, of course, I think did an awesome job just pulling in a lot of developers into the Ethereum development, getting primarily young developers. And I think, the design of the heavy reliance on Solidity was smart because the similarity with JavaScript brought in a lot of those developers. I think early younger developers, JavaScript's a language that you often use or learn very early on. And so it captured like that right cohort of like excited young technical people, which is great. It definitely made it cool, right? Young people make things cool. But I think what we could use more of is just in the developer world, kind of zooming out and expanding to different types of talent. Like cryptography in general has there have been people working on some of these like lower level concepts before Bitcoin for like ages and ages. And so, there is this small group of highly specialized talent and like distributed systems and stuff like that I think is like, oh, cool, this stuff is happening in blockchain. And so we're getting some of that trickle in. I want to see more of that. But then also other sorts of engineers. And I think that these new layer ones coming online again, that's another canvas, right? Another opportunity for the crypto space to pull in more developers from different places. And then I'd also say more broadly that just diversity in general. I guess this may be more on like the crypto fanatic or the retail side, or everyday user side. But especially crypto fanatics, it's a very specific type of person, and I'm saying that it's usually, young dudes, young Western dudes or whatnot, but that's not the only thing I mean when I talk about diversity. Diversity of thought is very important. There is definitely a political leaning on the more, like, I guess, libertarian side. There's a cultural leaning on the more extremely online side of people that are like, I don't know, culturally in like chat rooms and hang out online and stuff. And that breeds a certain way of thinking and certain culture. And so I would like to see projects and people coming into the space that push the boundaries of those cultures and of those like political leanings and are just a little bit louder about like crypto's for everybody. It's like every type of person and every type of culture and like political leaning should be into crypto. And I do think that that's a bit of a hurdle because sometimes outwardly the perception of the type of person that's into crypto is unfortunately, not the most flattering one. Hate to tell you guys if you're in the crypto space, but I do think that's something we have to work on.
And do you think it's a problem of like education or usability or like specifically like inclusiveness and diversity? Like what is the main thing we can like change a bit to bring more people into the space?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything. I do think that like usability is a big barrier here. You have to be like, the UX is still not there. Like, I'm thinking about Ethereum DeFi. Like MetaMask has come a long way and it's super cool, but to us it seems second nature. But anybody else who doesn't know anything about like a Web3 and needing to use a Web3 wallet to interact with these sites, it's not very intuitive, and you have to be highly motivated still to get past that barrier. So, I think that's one thing. I also think that, more like inclusivity and culture, like I mentioned, can go a long way. There's sort of a kind of a bit of a slight piece of like PR work maybe around like what the typical crypto person can and should be like. It's hard sometimes, especially when you're in these sort of siloed like online communities, right? You're in your like Twitter bubble. It can be hard to reach other bubbles or correct misconceptions about other bubbles, and yeah, I'd say just more folks prioritizing education and usability and inclusivity as just like a value in their organization, and like a small part of everything they want to work on, having some component of that.
Yep. And I guess last question I have is, do you know any good books that people can read? Like, I know we briefly covered some of the resources that you use to stay up to date on the day-to-day, but like, for example, like I like Cami Russo's book about the history of Ethereum a lot. I feel like it was like used in like very good, like really well written, essentially, like people from the outside can like really get excited, I think. But is there anything else you've seen that can like you'd recommend to somebody from the outside to get excited about the space?
Yes. So yeah, Camille Russo's book is great. I'm partway through it, and I know there are other books that have come out on Ethereum. Like Matthew Leasing just wrote a book that I haven't gotten to yet, but I'm sure it's great because I know he's a great writer, and he's been covering the space like closely with Consensus and Ethereum since like the very early days. So I'm sure that one's great too. But I might recommend a Bitcoin book. I think that reading the Bitcoin Standard is a good introduction to the sort of the economic side of like why blockchains, why Bitcoin. I also think The Sovereign Individual is a great book. Have you heard of that one?
Yep. Yeah, it's
I actually
on one hand it's kind of like a little bit hard to read. On the other hand, it's almost like it feels like almost like yep, that's right. It feels like
got it here.
Literally, what's happening in the world is kind of like almost like you flip through the pages and you're like, oh my god, like this is actually happening. I like the observation there in the book about like returns on violence and kind of like changes in return of violence, specifically like decreasing return on violence with cryptography. That's a good one.
Yeah. Also, read sci-fi. Like I really like Neil Stephenson, and I think Snow Crash is like what kind of got me into his stuff, but he also has this book called Cryptonomicon, which is it's pretty dense and thick, but basically describes this like future where there's a type of a like Bitcoin and blockchain crypto economic world, so it's pretty cool. Like I do think there should be more crypto sci-fi out there, and a lot of the stuff that's more mainstream like does kind of touch on it if you look at it, and can be really inspiring.
That's right.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there that's more nonfiction too.
Cool. Well, sounds good. And where do people can find more about yourself and Thesis?
Yeah, so let's see. Twitter is always an option. I'm at cReckhow, first initial and last name. And check out if you're interested in learning more about tBTC and what Bitcoin on Ethereum, how that actually works and what you can actually do with it. You can go to tbtc.network. And we're on Twitter as well. And keep.network is the Keep site. That's where you can find me.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining today. That was really awesome.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, thank you for listening today. Really appreciate it. Wanted to mention something special. We are actually opening up applications for second batch of our accelerator. It's at openwebcollective.com. We are reviewing applications on a rolling basis to select 15 teams to join us on January 2021. Please apply there, openwebcollective.com. Thank you.